Welcome to CNRL Author Talks, where authors come to talk about their latest books with librarians from the Central Northern Regional Library in New South Wales, Australia. This week, Amanda talks to Laura Greaves about her latest book, The Dog's Best Friend.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Amanda. I'm a librarian at Tamworth and Central Northern Regional Libraries. I would like to welcome you to our virtual Q&A session with author Laura Greaves. So welcome, Laura, and thank you so much for joining us. I'm so excited to chat to you tonight because it's my favourite subject, dogs. I'm the person in my group of friends that talks about her dogs while they all talk about their kids. So this is a perfect topic for me. So I'm going to start by saying I absolutely loved your book. I was a little bit hesitant at the beginning to read it because I recently just lost my 10-year-old Labrador, Lucas.
Oh, that's so sorry.
That's right, thank you. So I haven't been able to watch or read anything about dogs since, as it's still a little bit raw, but I'm glad that I did because it made me appreciate the time I got to spend with him. And also realise how much joy animals can bring to not only a human life, but to each other as well, which I've actually learnt through my other 8-year-old lab, who constantly hangs by my side because she's missing her friend. Can you please tell us about your personal dog story?
Yes, absolutely. Well, first of all, thank you so much, Amanda, for inviting me to come and talk to you this evening. For anyone that's just joining us, I apologise for the fact that I'm in my car. I had power and we had a big power outage this afternoon and my internet has not come back online, hence why I'm in the car. I also live in the bush and I can't get a mobile phone signal inside my house, so I have to come up the hill. Anyway, my personal dog story goes back a long, long way. I've been a crazy dog lady my entire life, and I use that title very proudly. I own it. You know, my reputation precedes me wherever I go, and that's fine. I am the person who bores my friends with both dog and kid stories, so I'm extra tedious, perhaps. But I grew up with West Highland White Terriers. My family had a succession of them when I was a little girl. And when I was 10, I was given one of my own. You know, he was the family dog, but he was given to me as a Christmas gift. He was going to be my dog, the first dog that was really mine. His name was Robbie. He was adorable. But very sadly, I'd only had him for about a year when he was run over, and very sadly died, which was obviously devastating to a young girl, particularly a dog-mad young girl. But beyond being heartbroken, I was furious because, the person that hit Robbie didn't stop to try to help him. They just left him there in the gutter, where he was subsequently found by my very elderly grandfather, who was a very gruff World War II veteran who never showed any emotion. But that day he absolutely wept like a child, and it's one of the most vivid memories of him that I have. So I was so angry that someone could be so callous as to hit a little dog and just keep on driving that I did one of the only things that was kind of available to me as a 10-year-old dog lover and budding author, because I should add that I've always wanted to be an author. So I wrote a letter to my local newspaper in Adelaide, where I grew up, kind of expressing my anger and my feeling that there's a special place in hell for people that harm animals, which I still believe. And that letter was published. And not only was it published, but the editor of the section actually rang me up to say how sorry she was about Robbie and how moved she had been by my words. So it was a really formative experience in my young life, because I not only realized for the first time what a connector dogs are, that so many people love them and that their lives can really touch and move people, but I also realized in that moment the power of words, I think. Excuse me, I'm just getting over a cold, so I'm a little bit croaky.
Okay.
I realized the power that words have to touch people and to move people. So, you know, I don't think I realized until many years later just how much that experience shaped me as both a writer and an animal lover and a person. But it really did. And although I would have preferred to have Robbie well into his old age, I can't help but wonder whether I would be on this path having not had that experience as a young girl. So fast forward, now I'm in my 40s and I have 3 dogs of my own. I've got 2 senior Nova Scotia duck tolling retrievers, which a lot of people have never heard of. They look a bit like border collies, but they're smaller and they're red. And I also have a Kelpie border collie cross, who was an accident. We didn't mean to have 3 dogs, but she needed a home and we couldn't ignore that. So we've got a very full house and I wouldn't have it any other way.
Beautiful. No, I don't think I could do without them. I remember, like, my first dog was, I got Lucas when I was 30, for my 30th birthday. And I actually didn't realize myself the connections that dogs had in our lives. You know, I'd always used to laugh when I was little at my neighbour, how she talked to her little Maltese dogs. I'd be behind the fence laughing and say, oh my God, she's talking to those dogs like a baby. And then I was exactly the same way when I got my dogs. So
I think that memes on social media every now and then that's like, you know, how you say goodbye to your significant other when you leave the house. It's like, oh, bye, see you later. Yeah. And then what you say to your dogs, and it's like, oh, my darlings, I'll be back very soon. I'll miss you and I love you so much. And that's hey.
Exactly. So that led me to the next question is, did your personal dog story inspire you to start writing books about dogs?
Yes and no. So before I started writing non-fiction collections of stories about amazing dogs, I had also written 3 novels, which, funnily enough, are about people, not dogs. But all 3 of those books had a very kind of significant kind of supporting cast of canine characters. You know, all the characters have dogs and dogs are quite integral to the stories in some of those books. And through writing those stories and dealing with my editors and the publishers at Penguin who published my books, they kind of got to know me as a bit of a crazy dog lady. And they actually came to me one day and said, look, we want to do some kind of non-fiction, heartwarming dog book. We know you love dogs. Is that something you'd be interested in? And of course I said, yes, please, like right away. And the rest is kind of history. The first dog book I wrote was Incredible Dog Journeys. And if I had had more time and wasn't in such a flap about the internet, I would have brought a copy of that with me to show everybody. But that was really well received. And since then I've written 7 more. So the new one, A Dog's Best Friend, is actually my 7th dog book. Wow. So it absolutely set me on a path. But even prior to writing books, I was very involved in writing about dogs. I started my writing career in journalism, and for a time there I was actually the editor of a dog magazine. So I've always been sort of in that dog world, I guess, in one way or another. But my own dogs have inspired my dog books to various extents. My last book before this one, Extraordinary Old Dogs, was directly inspired by my guy Tex, who's about to turn 14. Wow. And, you know, often if you've read any of my books, the introductions to them tend to be all about my own dogs and the things they do for me. So they always find a way in, for sure.
Excellent. So A Dog's Best Friend, it contains 15 short stories on the most unlikely friendships. Can you tell us a little bit about each of the stories and why you chose those stories?
Absolutely. Well, I'll say first of all that the overall reason behind writing A Dog's Best Friend was joy, essentially. You know, I think all of us have been through so much over the past nearly 2 years now, you know, because of the times, capital T. And I think, well, certainly from my own perspective, I had found myself getting really bogged down in the drudgery of it all, in having to, well, homeschool while also working. That was certainly challenging. Not being allowed to go anywhere, to the things I enjoy, not being able to go to restaurants or live music or theatre or any of those things, not being able to see my friends, my children not being able to see their friends. It all just felt very heavy and very monotonous. And I lost sight of the things I enjoyed. I almost kind of forgot how to have a good time, I think. So when the time came to pitch my book to my editors at Penguin, I just wanted to write something joyful, something that was purely happy, that would just make people go, "Aw," and didn't necessarily have a deeper message. I mean, I think there is a deeper message in that, friendship is all about looking beyond differences and finding the connections that we all share, and how dogs are such great advocates for that. But beyond that, I just wanted to write something really happy and really uplifting. So when it came to choosing the stories, it was all about which ones are the cutest, which ones are the quirkiest, which ones are the most unexpected. So if I won't go through all of them, because honestly, I can literally talk about dog friends and adorable, unlikely pairings for days. So I'll tell you about maybe a handful of my favorite ones.
Yeah.
So I've done quite a few radio and television interviews already around the book, and the story that everybody asks about, there's always one from each book, and I can never predict which one it's going to be, but there's always one that people fall in love with. And this time around, it's the story of Kevin and Yiddle. So Yiddle is a 1 kilogram Chihuahua. And in fact, he's called Yiddle because his owner would always say to him, "Oh, you're so Yiddle." And the name kind of stuck. And then Kevin is a 200-ish kilo llama. So Chihuahua and llama, little and large, perhaps the most unlikely pairing you can envisage, and they certainly look hilarious when they're next to each other. But Kevin was, I won't say rescued, but sort of rehomed from a children's petting zoo to a farm in the US. And he's a very friendly animal, perhaps because he's always been around other animals, always been around people, children, etc. He's curious. He's gregarious, outgoing. He likes the goats. He likes the sheep, the pigs on the farm. But when he met Yiddle, he was kind of immediately besotted. And he follows Yiddle all around the farm. And Yiddle seems to understand that he's a very tiny dog in a very big world, and gravitates towards Kevin, perhaps for some kind of protective thing, or perhaps because they just saw something in each other that spoke to each of them. So it's a really, really beautiful, beautiful friendship, and it's definitely one of my favorite stories. The other one that I really love is the story of Benton and Boone. They actually live together in a wildlife sanctuary. Benton is a Great Pyrenees, which is a dog that's very well known for its protective instincts. And in fact, a lot of farmers use them as livestock guardians, because they just will kind of naturally ward off predators and keep an eye on herds, large groups of animals. And then Boone is a disabled raccoon. He was born with a neurological condition that's caused by quite a common disease that affects raccoons. And consequently, he can't really move around. He doesn't really walk. He kind of rolls from place to place. And obviously would never have been able to survive in the wild. So he was brought into the care of this wildlife sanctuary, and Benton just decided, okay, this is my guy. It's my job to look out for him. I'm not going to leave his side. And they really are just kind of attached at the hip. And it's so sweet. And what I love about that story is there's a lot of people who say dogs don't really form friendships. They're not genuinely, I should say, interested in other creatures, for their jokes or, their personality. It's some practical thing, they offer protection or they provide food, or, it's quite a cynical way to look at it. But I think with Benton and Boone, that story is so clearly anathema to that. It's they Benton gets nothing from Boone. Boone, okay, Benton looks out for him, but he's already in a wildlife sanctuary, so he'd be protected anyway. So why then do they always want to be together? There's no reason for it aside from the fact that they just enjoy each other's company, which I think is really, really beautiful.
Thank you. So why do you think people like to hear about these type of stories?
That's a really good question. I've thought about it a lot, and I think the answer is twofold. So generally speaking, when we're not in a pandemic, I think we like those stories because, well, for a start, they're really, really cute. But I think they really speak to dogs' capacity for love. You know, dogs, I always say they're a gift we don't deserve, and I really believe it because they just give us so much. All they want to do is love us. All they want to do is be with us. And by us, of course, I mean humans, but that extends to other species as well. You know, when they find a creature they like, be it human or llama or raccoon or whatever, they will do whatever it takes to stay by that companion side. And, you know, perhaps that doesn't happen so much with human relationships. You know, we tend to judge people based on all manner of things, whether it's appearance, whether it's social status, socioeconomic status, whatever. Dogs don't see any of that. They just purely take other creatures at face value. And once they decide they love you forever. So I think people like to see that truly kind of unconditional friendship, because it's different, I guess, to what we experience in our own day-to-day lives. So that's the kind of general reason I think we like them. Then if we're talking specifically about why we like them now, and I don't know about you, but I'm seeing more of these stories around now than ever before. You know, there's always things on Facebook and cute videos, and even the news, you know, the nightly news will sometimes show these funny stories. I think it's because, as I was saying earlier, we need joy. We need moments right now that remind us there's still good in the world. Yeah. Amid the chaos and the crisis and everything we've all been going through, sometimes creatures just find each other and souls just connect. And these relationships serve as a really great reminder of that.
Yeah. Well, I must admit, I didn't waste, but about an hour on Instagram looking at Gebro and Button's Instagram account because I actually loved the little kitten. I think it's Monkey, the little kitten. She interacted with the dogs, and I was just like, oh my gosh, I'm so in love with this kitten.
Oh. So for those who haven't read the book, Gebro and Buttons are a golden retriever and a deer who have been best friends for 11 years. So their friendship is not only proof that it's not all about practical things, but that it's enduring. You know, these friendships really can last a lifetime, which is just so nice to see.
Yeah. So how did you come about these stories? Did people reach out to you, or did you come across these stories as part of your research?
It's a little bit of everything. I mean, certainly because I've been a writer for so long and I've been kind of in that animal welfare, you know, dog loving sphere for so long. I do have a lot of contacts in that arena, people that I can reach out to and say, hey, if you come across a great story that fits this brief, please let me know. Certainly my reputation as a crazy dog lady precedes me pretty much everywhere I go. All my family and friends know that I'm dog mad. So people are forever emailing me links to stories they've seen or tagging me in posts on social media. I love it, but honestly, sometimes it actually gets a little frustrating because there'll be one particular story that's doing the rounds that everyone's falling in love with, and I will get tagged in it 100 times. And I just feel like saying thank you, but do you think I haven't seen this already? You know? And then the other thing is, I always feel like there's a little bit of magic to it. You know, it feels a little bit serendipitous because whenever I decide on a theme for a new book, I just kind of start to see those stories everywhere. And I always liken it to how, you know, you never notice other Toyotas on the road until you're driving a Toyota yourself, and then you see them everywhere. It's the same for me. I don't know if it's because I'm not looking for them until I start to consciously look for them. But once I've got it in my mind that this is what I'm going to write about, those stories just seem to appear out of the ether. So it feels a little bit like the universe has my back, in that respect.
So how much research did you need to do for this book?
I do quite a bit of research. And it obviously depends on the book. Like, for example, when I wrote Miracle Nuts, which is all about dogs that weren't expected to survive for one reason or another, but then not only survived, but thrived and went on to do really incredible things. There was a lot more research with that book because there were so many medical conditions. So a lot of those stories were about dogs that had been sick or injured, weren't expected to pull through, but did. So I had to do a lot of veterinary research, and thankfully I had an amazing vet who made himself available to me so I could literally email him and say, why didn't this dog die of this? There's a dog in that story who had 3 legs cut off in a farming accident and survived for over 12 hours before she was even discovered. So I was saying to him, why didn't this dog die of blood loss before she could get help? And so there was a lot of research in that book. This book, there wasn't a lot of that kind of secondary technical research, but of course I always interview all my dog owners. So once I've identified which stories I'd like to include, I then have to reach out. Well, first of all, I have to track down the dog owners, which is often harder than it sounds. Facebook, thankfully, has made that a lot easier than it might otherwise be, but not everyone's on Facebook. So sometimes I'm writing letters and calling people and emailing acquaintances and all that kind of stuff. Then I have to explain what I'm doing, ask them if they'd like to be involved, which is a funny thing for me because I always feel like I'm being a bother, like I'm really sort of encroaching on somebody's life and asking them, in many cases, I'm asking them to tell me about a very serious incident that's happened. And sometimes it's really the worst thing that's ever happened to somebody, but their dog has been there to help them. So I'm very cognizant of what I'm asking people to do. But thankfully, with only a handful of exceptions, people are always very flattered to be asked. A lot of people are very happy, especially if their dog has passed on, to know that some part of that dog story will remain. It's sort of a legacy thing. And then once we've got it all lined up, I interview each dog owner for at least an hour. And I'm not just talking to them about their dog and the particular incident that the chapter is about, but I'm talking to them about their own life and their history with dogs. And I want to know exactly what it took to lead that person to that dog, because that's what the story's about. It's not just a dog has a cute best friend, or a dog did an amazing thing, or saved a life, or survived against the odds. It's everything that had to happen and all those tiny little decisions that had to be made along the way to facilitate that happening. And for me, that's really where the story is, and that's really where my interest lies. So often I'm asking very, very personal questions of people. But thankfully, they're usually very willing to get quite vulnerable with me, which is something that I recognize as a huge privilege and something that I'm always really grateful for.
Excellent. So when undertaking your research for a dog's best friend, was there anything that you discovered that surprised you?
Oh, what a good question. Gosh, things surprise me all the time. Speaking in kind of broad terms, I'm constantly surprised and amazed by what dogs are capable of. Just when I think I know what they can do for us and for each other and for other creatures, they'll surprise me again and go above and beyond, or do some job that I never could have imagined them doing. And that's always really wonderful, because it's nice to be surprised in a lovely, delightful way,
Yeah.
I suppose, the sheer number of different species that the dogs in my book have become friends with was surprising. I mean, we have everything from, as I say, a chihuahua to deer, raccoons. There's a wallaroo in there. There's porcupines. There's a rabbit. There's chooks. there's just so many amazing stories. And I think part of the reason they're so amazing is that for many of them, certainly if we're talking in evolutionary terms, not only should they not be friends, but they should be sworn enemies. You know, some creatures should be nowhere near a dog. They should only see a dog as a predator and a threat, but they don't. They see them as a friend. So that was certainly surprising. And then there was just minor little things. One of the stories is about a police dog and his friendship with his human handler. So it's the only story in the book that's actually about a dog and a human. They were very involved in apprehending Malcolm Naden. I don't know if people remember him, but he was a very, very wanted criminal for a number of years in rural New South Wales. And just things about how police dogs work was surprising to me, because I guess I had swallowed the Hollywood version of what they do, and the handler, the policeman saying to me, no, it doesn't work like that. That never happens. I was like, really? So I definitely learned a few things there too.
I think for me, what surprised me was the pit bull having the relationship with the kitten, because often or not, the pit bulls get a bad name.
They do.
Certainly a bad rap. So I was very surprised, I guess, that it was able to have a relationship with something so small. I was imagining this pit bull eating this poor kitten.
Oh, I'm so glad you said that, because I am very in love with pit bulls. I'm quite passionate about changing the narrative, dispelling the bad press that pit bulls have been unfairly given over the years. So I was desperate to include that story, and I was so excited when Bubba and Rue's owner, Becca, agreed to talk to me, because I'm hopeful that the stories I write can change people's mind about so-called bad breeds. And in fact, I'm working on a proposal now for my next book that's going to be exactly along those lines, stories of, you know, unfairly maligned dogs that have done really wonderful things. So watch this space.
Oh, great. So this, I think you've answered this question a little bit, but I know that COVID's probably made it quite difficult, but have you ever had a chance of actually meeting the animals that you write about in person?
Yes, I have. Not for this book, unfortunately. It was all online. But yes, several of the dogs that I've written about over the years in my various books, I have met and hung out with and spent lovely afternoons with. One of the most memorable occasions that springs to mind was the cover dog from my book, The Rescuers, which is about dogs that were rescued from pounds and shelters, who then rescued someone else. Literally, in some cases, you know, there's dogs in that book that pulled their owners from burning houses and all sorts of things, but also in a spiritual sense. So the dog on the cover is a pit bull, actually. Her name is Clove, and her owner, PJ, had substance abuse issues all his adult life, but Clove gave him the motivation he needed to get clean. And then they subsequently became these amazing hiking buddies, and they climb mountains and do all sorts of things all over America. So they're based in Long Island in New York, and I'm a runner. I've run the New York Marathon a couple of times, and the last time I was in New York to do that, I was actually able to meet PJ and Clove, and I got to take Clove on a walk through Central Park, and it was a really, really special meeting. And so I'm always glad when I can, you know, snuggle the dogs that I write about.
Yeah. So the stories are focused on the relationships of the animals, but the stories also mention some wonderful humans and what they are doing. So when researching for your book, was there perhaps a human story that overshadowed the animal story?
I wouldn't say overshadowed, but there are certainly human stories in the book that are every bit as compelling, as fascinating, as moving as the animal stories. And as I mentioned, you know, it takes special humans and special circumstances to enable these kinds of unlikely friendships to blossom. You know, somebody who doesn't care, you know, about their dog beyond a kid's pet in the backyard isn't likely to also rescue chooks, or also establish a wildlife sanctuary for porcupines and encourage their animals to spend time together. So certainly those stories are so interesting to me. As I said, what leads somebody to be able to have that kind of relationship, not just with dogs, but with all creatures, great and small. So, I certainly loved the story of Henrik and Aurora. Henrik is a golden retriever. Oh, no, he's a Labrador. And Aurora is a cockatiel. And they're best mates. And Aurora was extremely close to his mum. So Aurora is actually a boy. And when she passed away, he just was bereft, obviously, and needed another living being to love. He had all this love for his mother that suddenly had nowhere to go. So he just transferred it to the family's golden retriever. And I think talking to their owner, Maddie, about how that happened was really interesting, because certainly for me, I would never allow them anywhere near each other. I would be so terrified about what could happen. But she's the kind of personality who was willing, in a very cautious, very well supervised way, to sort of see where it went and see how it would evolve and develop. And it just takes a really special, patient, connected person, I think, to be able to facilitate that kind of friendship. So yeah, there's plenty of stories like that in the book.
So this book, it made me laugh, cry, and really appreciate my furry friends. But there was a part in your introduction that really made me look deeper at my human relationships. So I'm just going to read a bit. So as you read this book, I challenge you to think of these heartwarming interspecies friendships, not as weird or unlikely. I'm just going to let Connor in, sorry. Unlikely, but as evidence that embracing difference is every bit as wonderful as celebrating similarity. If more of us sought to befriend those who appear to be different from ourselves, we learn that we are all more alike than we ever imagined. If we all followed the example set by dogs, the world would be a friendlier place. So what message do you hope that other readers would take from this book?
That's such a great question. And, I sometimes worry that the books that I'm writing are kind of preaching to the converted, in a sense, because obviously the majority of people that would buy or read my books are already dog lovers. But I fervently hope that people that wouldn't necessarily gravitate towards books like mine might be curious enough to pick them up, because I think they're the ones that are really going to take something away from them, from the books. So and what I hope they take away from it is that message of dogs they don't judge. They don't look at superficial things. If dogs were people, they would never be interested in small talk, for example. They would immediately ask you, they'd meet you at a party and straight away they'd ask you what your deepest fear is, or, your most fervently held hope for your future. They see into the soul of people, and they take people as they come. They accept you as they are. They never want to change you. And I can't really think of any relationship that humans have that is truly, truly unconditional in that sense. And I think they should be, so if there's anything we can learn from dogs, it's perhaps how to be more accepting, more truly loving towards our fellow human beings. And especially at the moment, there's a lot of division between vaccinated and unvaccinated, and masks and no masks, and all that kind of stuff. But we are all in the same place, and we're all going through the same stuff. And we should be coming together and supporting each other rather than going out of our way to look for differences and reasons to not get along, because that's what dogs do, But the other thing I would say is I take my dog's likes and dislikes very seriously. So actually one of the dog owners in the book Jason, he owns Rommel, who was best friends with the Wallaroo. And he was telling me that a previous dog he owned loved everybody except for one person. He only ever growled at one person he ever met in his life. And that man turned out to be a very serious, dangerous criminal. Mm-hmm. So perhaps not to that extent, but I put a lot of credence in how my dogs are with other people, because I think they get a real read very quickly on what people are like and what their intentions are. So I also think, as well as, you know, let's be more accepting and try to judge less, I also think that to a large extent we need to trust our own gut more. And if you get a bad vibe from somebody, there's probably a reason for that, and we should listen to it.
Yes, my 10-year-old lab was very much knew who I should avoid on my walks. Mm-hmm. He knew that I should just keep walking, and his was that he always stayed really close and his tail went up in the air. So
yeah.
My 8-year-old lab, she doesn't read people as well as what Lucas does. Even she doesn't read our emotions quite so much as Lucas, but I think because she always kind of read Lucas's emotions more so than ours. But I think now that she's on her own, she's getting a lot better.
Yeah, she probably a bit of the, big brother effect, where she didn't have to think about those things because he did it for her.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's a bit like that actually with my dogs as well. I mean, Coco, my Kelpie cross, is attached to me at the hip. She doesn't leave my side. I'm very much her person. I have an anxiety disorder, and she can very much sense when I'm spiraling a little bit, and she makes sure that she sticks really close to me. And similarly, Tex, who is my almost 14-year-old dog, he's always been very aloof. And it's one of the things that I've always loved most about him, is that if he doesn't like you, he won't apologize for it. He doesn't want to be around you. And he'll just, there are people who come to my house who I like very much, and they'll say, "Oh, where's Tex? I haven't seen Tex." And it's because he's taken himself out to the garden and he won't come back until they've gone because he doesn't like them. But of course I never tell them that.
So this is probably for the people that haven't yet read your book, maybe a little bit of a spoiler. But for me, it was sad to learn that some of the animals had passed. So is it hard to write about that?
Yes, it is. It's always hard, and I cannot tell you the number of times I end up crying over Zoom with strangers as they tell me that their dog, about how their dog's passed away. Happens all the time. I cry buckets when I'm writing these books. I often get sort of vaguely accusatory emails and messages from people saying, "Your book made me cry." And I'm like, well, too bad, because it made me cry. So it of course, it's hard, because I can feel, it's so obvious when I interview a dog owner what their dog has meant to them. Mm-hmm. And I can feel their sadness when they're telling me about how their dog passed away. But again, it comes down to the privilege that I feel to be able to share even a part of the story of that dog's life, and to be in some small way involved in continuing that dog's legacy. It's a beautiful gift, and it is one that I take very seriously. But I've actually become good friends with a lot of the dog owners that I've featured in my various books, and in several instances, I have been the first person they've told when their dog has passed away. They will literally email me and say, "We had to put such and such to sleep an hour ago." I was the first person they thought to tell. And that is, the responsibility that I feel to do justice to these incredible animals and the incredible bonds that they had. It's a big one. I don't take it lightly at all. So yeah, it's tough, but it's also beautiful to be able to play a part in that.
So what would you tell those critics who think interspecies relationships are unlikely to occur?
Well, I would say open your eyes, because they're everywhere. And as I wrote in the book, they're only unlikely because we, in our wisdom, think they shouldn't happen. But I think, you know, what I was trying to get across in that passage that you read is, why shouldn't they?
Yeah.
Why shouldn't they happen? Because dogs and animals are so accepting. They are willing to take other creatures as they come. If they're treated well, they will treat you well in response. So I think critics perhaps need to consider why they think it's so unusual that two creatures that look different should find something in each other that they both enjoy. You know, consider what that says about your own view of people that you perceive to be different from you, because really nobody is different from anybody else. And we'd all do well to remember that, I think.
Yeah. And so, and I think you probably touched on this as well, why do you think dogs make good best friends?
Well, goodness, how much time do we have? Well, they're adorable for a start.
Yeah.
They're so loyal, they're so loving, they give so much of themselves and they ask for so little in return. And you know, so many of us don't think of animals as sentient creatures with thoughts and feelings and wants and needs. We don't treat them the way that they deserve to be treated. And yet they continue to trust us and they continue to want to love us and to want to be with us. And it's not just because we feed and house them. Maybe it was that way when wolves were first domesticated, but it's not that way anymore. It's a true soul connection, I think. And, you know, even someone who's had 10 dogs or 15 dogs in their lifetime will be able to tell you about one or two or three of those dogs that was really a heart dog, you know, that really connected with them in a surprising way, or changed the course of their life, really, as my little dog Robbie did for me. So I think they make great best friends because they're always there for us. And we can learn so much from them if we're willing to listen and to take on board the lessons that they can impart.
So you've currently shared with us what you're working on. So when do we expect to see that one come out?
Well, it will be around this time next year. That tends to be when Penguin likes to release my books. I suppose they make good Christmas presents for the dog lovers in your life. But I actually haven't started on it yet because I've had so much else happening this year that I haven't got around to it, which sounds terrible. But yeah, I did another project. I was a writer in residence at the Female Orphan School in Parramatta in Western Sydney. So I was researching and writing about the lives of the girls that lived there in the early part of the 19th century. So that was obviously quite an involved process with all the research and everything that had to be done. I'm doing a PhD as well. I've got 2 kids. I had to homeschool one for 3 months, so it was all a little bit chaotic. But yes, around this time next year is the short answer to that question.
Look forward to it. So the last question before we go to the audience, when you are not writing, what do you enjoy doing in your spare time?
Wow, what spare time?
I know after that you probably don't have any.
Well, obviously I love spending time with my dogs. I love to take them walking. I live in the Blue Mountains, just west of Sydney, so there's loads of beautiful walks that we can take them on. I'm also a very keen runner. I do marathons, so that keeps me pretty busy. The PhD takes up a lot of my time. But also I'm just starting to get really interested in visual arts. I never considered myself a particularly visually oriented person. You know, I always would joke that I do words and not pictures. Yeah. But I'm finding myself increasingly drawn to things like collage and sculpture and just doing stuff with my hands that's a bit less cerebral, perhaps, something I can just kind of lose myself in and have something tangible to show for it at the end. So yeah, I'm trying to squeeze in time to do those kinds of things too.
Great. So I'm just going to check to see if we have any questions. So I've got from Chris, Kelpie Border Collie Cross dogs. We have Millie who turned 11 yesterday. Every single day she has an adventure. We could write 6 novels just about her.
Oh my goodness, can I relate to that one? Coco, my Kelpie border, is the most insane dog I've ever had, but she's also the most affectionate, sweet dog I've ever had. She's banned from the boarding kennel that we take my other dogs to when we go on holidays because she can scale their 8-foot fences. The people that own it kept looking out of their dining room window at night and finding her standing on the windowsill. And she jumps our fences, disappears into the bush for a while, and then comes and knocks on the front door when she's ready to come in. She's just, crazy. I've never known a dog like her, but she's very special. So thank you, Chris. I think, yeah, I know exactly what you mean.
And from Narelle, I'm with you, Chris. We had a 12-year-old German Shepherd, and there were lots of tales about her life. Still missing her after 3 years, but what a joy she was in our lives.
Yeah, I mean, old dogs, they're just the best. My dream one day is to run a sanctuary just for senior dogs. I just think they're amazing. They really are. I've had puppies. My current dogs I've had since they were puppies, and I've loved them every day, but there's just something about them in their senior years that's very, very special thing to be a part of.
Yeah. So Chris has got, I hope you all have a copy of the Rainbow Bridge poem. Yes, I do.
Yes. Oh, I can imagine you would. Yeah, no, it's a beautiful poem.
Oh, it was terrible to have to read that, but beautiful at the same time. Regarding pets that have passed on. Narelle, to everyone. I am so pleased you went out of your way for this interview to find yourself in your car. This has been a wonderful chat. I already know of 2 family members to purchase your book for Christmas gifts. Dogs are so forgiving and loyal companions. All the best, Laura.
Oh, thank you, Narelle. That's so lovely. And yes, I'm so glad I was able to come and talk to you all and didn't have to miss it, thanks to my terrible internet provider, who I won't name.
No. Okay. So again, thank you for chatting with me, Laura. I had a fantastic time chatting to you about all things dogs. I'm just disappointed that I couldn't bring my dog here tonight because she wasn't having a bar of staying on the chair for more than 5 minutes.
They never do what they want when we want them to do anything, do they?
No. They would happily sit on my lap, when we're outside, a 30-kilo dog sitting on my lap. But when she's got a chair of her own, she's like, no.
Yes. Mine are very much the same.
Yes. So I'd like to thank all our audience for joining us tonight. And if you haven't had a chance to read A Dog's Best Friend, I highly recommend it. It is a book containing 15 heartwarming stories that will make you laugh and cry. In the back, it also contains social media accounts of all the animals mentioned in the book. And I highly recommend you check those out because they are very funny. Mm-hmm. And again, Laura, thank you so much for joining us and taking the time to be with us tonight.
It's my absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for inviting me along, Amanda. Thank you for everybody who came. I really enjoyed it. I appreciate your interest. Thanks, everyone.
Well, I hope your power gets back on and your internet up and running soon.
Yes, me too. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Good night.
Bye.
For more CNRL Author Talks and other podcasts, visit our website at cnl.nsw.gov.au or follow your CNRL branch Facebook page. You can also watch many of our Author Talks. Just search YouTube for CNRL interviews. This podcast was recorded at Tamworth City Library with music by Chad Crouch, aka Poddington Bear, from the freemusicarchive.org. I'm Jonathan Stilts from the CNRL Library Innovation Studio. See you next time for more CNRL Author Talks.